Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to be gathering this morning on this town hall, which is sponsored by HOPEnDialogue and Open Excellence in Latin America. And our subject continues to be about open dialogue, and we're completely honored and blessed to have Jaakko Sekala, who is one of the main co-founders of this way of working on our panel today, and also Mia Kurti, who is here also from Finland, also a teacher and one of the people who's been doing open dialogue and carrying it around the world with Jaakko, as are many of our panelists and reflecting team members. I'm also thinking of Birgitta Alakari and Markku Sekala, and Markku, who's not here, but here very much in our hearts as the other founders of this successful, skillful, humane way of working with families in crisis, which we will be talking about and hearing from the panelists about. We are going to be focusing on what is open dialogue today. But before we go to that, Rafaela and Ray, who are going to be in the chat with the people who have come on from all over the world, 36 countries, they're going to be explaining what they're doing with the chat. Would you go ahead, Ray and Rafaela? Thank you.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Raffaella Bocobello. I'm a researcher. I have the honor to coordinate the HOPEnDialogue project that aim to connect the open dialogue learning community. And when we have started this town hall collaboration, our aim was to support our community during the pandemic. And doing this, we have discovered, analyzing the registration for the first 6 town hall, that many people joined this community during the pandemic. The town hall was followed from people followed the town hall for 52 nations before the summer break, more than 1,000 people. And since many people were not familiar with the open dialogue way of working, we have decided to dedicate this town hall also to explain to new people what open dialogue is, so they can feel welcome to join our community. Today, as Luisa mentioned, there are people for 36 nations joining this town hall. And from these people, 70 people are people with lived experience. Welcome in the chat room. There are more than 60 family members and 23 researchers, and the other are professionals. In the total, there are more than 300 people in the chat room. And we really want that you feel welcome. And I give the word to Ray, that is our expert chat person. I'm very happy. Thank you all to be here.
Thanks, Rafaela. I love that I'm the expert chat person. That's so worrying. I spend too much time on Zoom. So we're really glad to have everybody here. It's fantastic. Mine and Rafaela's role really is to just be around on the chat and to try and respond to people. We will have, obviously, this beautiful dialogue happening on screen, but those of us like myself and Rafaela who are attendees, we will be listening but having our own thoughts and ideas. The chat box is where we share those and have a dialogue around the dialogue. So please do if you want to. Also, we have a Q&A area. You'll see it on the bottom of your screen. If you have specific questions that you're curious about, please write them there so they don't get lost in the chat. We're not going to give these to the speakers. They may be influenced by it, the panelists, but actually there's 186 people here with lots of wisdom and experience. So we ask you to look in the Q&A and respond to some of the other people's questions and really build up this conversation between us, not wait for the experts to tell us what to do. Because as we know in Open Dialogue, we all have experiences to be heard and valued, but I'm not sure there's such thing as an expert. So it's lovely to meet you all. Is that sufficient, Kermit and Louisa, or is there anything else to say? Or shall we go and be participants now?
That's very good. Just the thought that, you know, all of us here are experts in our way. The people on the panel are invited because of the particular experience that they've had, but we're all contributors to the dialogue. And to the extent that we're able to within this short time and in the technical and all the constraints that we have, we try to pay attention to the chat, and we try to bring that into the reflection. But we can't possibly respond to all the questions. And ultimately, I think one way to think about open dialogue isn't about getting one answer or the right answer. It's about creating the field of dialogue. And that's our focus here. And part of that is to understand, I think one of the unique things about what we have created, what we're trying to create here, has to do with the different feeling, that we're not rushing to have a dialogue with the idea that we're going to get to a conclusion, that we're trying to create an open space for a full dialogue in which we, everybody who's speaking, whether it's on the panel or in the chat, has the time to think and reflect on what they have said and what other people have said, and in that space for new ideas and new feelings and new thoughts to arise naturally, rather than this sort of race that dialogues in, you know, the real world sometimes can feel like. And so with that, don't be surprised to see that the panel sometimes might not jump in and talk right away. There might be some time and some space in between people talking with each other. And that's part of the plan, is so that in that time, the chat can evolve and people can be reflecting and asking each other questions, and maybe some of those questions will contribute to the panelists' discussion. But just to understand that part of the answer to the question of what is open dialogue really comes in the form of how this particular dialogue that we're having feels to participate in, and the fact that it's not rushed, and it's not, it allows time for people to, you know, give respect and think and come up with new thoughts that they might not have in another more pressured situation. And so with that in mind, I'd like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. And we should probably have the reflectors introduce themselves at this point too.
Yes. Okay.
So if you'd all just pay attention to who is muted and who is not muted, and whoever is not muted is the person who wants to speak next, and allow them to do that in an unhurried way. And then when we're done with that, I'll take the people who are on the reflecting team off of the screen, and they'll be in the chat room. I'll also take Rafaela and Rachel off of the screen.
They'll still hear, obviously, and see everything.
Yeah, and so with that, I'd like to invite you all to start introducing yourselves.
My name is Mia. I'm a nurse and a family therapist from Finland. Nice to be here.
My name is Rose Spade. I'm a peer specialist in Westchester, New York, and I'm very happy to be here. And I also am a trainer of peer support open dialogue.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Sandy Steingard. I'm a psychiatrist from Vermont in the United States. And I have a number of connections here today connected to the organizations that are sponsoring it, but I've had the privilege of being trained by Mary Olson, Jaco, who's here, Mia, many others. And my major focus or reason I think for being here is that we have been trying to create an adaptation of this work in Vermont that we call collaborative network approach. And so I've been involved in developing that and beginning the trainings. Thank you. It's quite an honor to be here.
Hello, my name is Olga Runciman. I am a psychologist and also used to work as a psychiatric nurse. I'm also chair of the Hearing Voices, and I'm really pleased to be here today. I know a lot of you, and just warms my heart to be here. Open dialogue, what's it mean to me? Why am I here today? I think it's been a very long journey, and it will be ongoing, but right now I'm here.
My name is Paul Okuruke. I am a nurse by profession and a first generation African. It's a privilege to be here. I always say that I'm a student of open dialogue, but culturally, I will have been sitting by the log of fire with my peers at home, having a dialogue, and that is the way we live. So when I heard about open dialogue, it was second nature to me, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jaakko Seikkula. I've been involved in, I'm a scientist as a professor in psychotherapy in University of Jyväskylä in Finland. And I've been working in open dialogue kind of things 35 years and nowadays involved in many projects throughout the world actually. And I'm very glad to be here.
Hello, my name is Tamaki Saito, a Japanese psychiatrist. It's my honor to be here. I'm studying open dialogue since 2010, and I took a training course by Miyakuti, more than 100 hours. And I translated Jako's 2 books, and I wrote a manual of open dialogue for Japanese practitioners. It's my honor to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shuichi from Japan. I'm a psychiatrist. This year I just finished the open dialogue trainers training in Helsinki, and Kamit and Riza are my course mate of that course. They invited me here. I'm really happy to be with you.
I am Cathy Thorley and I'm in the UK and I work in London and I'm employed in the NHS as a family therapist, which I guess is the beginning of the history of coming to open dialogue. I'm a tutor on the peer-supported open dialogue training, and I'm quite involved with the randomised trial that's happening in the UK comparing peer-supported open dialogue to treatment as usual. And I'm really, really pleased to be here. Thank you.
That's everybody, I think. Thank you all so much for coming from very, very, very far away, all of you, and some of you, it's right in the middle of your night. So thank you for showing up and being wide awake. And to all the people that are coming from India and Africa and Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the Nordic countries, thank you so much for joining us. So now we're going to step back with the panel, step back with the reflecting team and the chat assistants, and we'll just have the panelists speaking. So it'll take just a moment for us to do that. Moment when everybody can peek at the chat and say hello to Kari and Mark and many, many friends. Welcome everyone. So Kermit is going to be just having switching the screen right now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now we invite the panelists, and Jaakko, I know you have slides that you'd like to show. Perhaps you could begin if you'd like. And we're going to be talking about the history of what is open dialogue for each of us.
Okay, I could say some words, and I will show one slide. It's a bit, a lot of things in that slide, but the history of that slide is that I'm writing a book. Actually, I have written a book. I'm now waiting for that to be published. And the topic of the book is that the open dialogue and dialogue cures, but why does it? And actually in the book, I make this question, and then I have written chapters to respond what in my mind, in my experiences, in my research, and based on some other research has made me to think about important aspects to be involved. And I've collected those titles, and I thought that only to show the idea about what kind of issues I think that are related, that we really can do the dialogical practice and open dialogue very helpful for the people. And my idea is not to go into detail so much, but to say some. Wait a moment, I make it more how it is. Yes, and there are 8 chapters in the book, as you see the titles, and the idea is that to make the dialogical practice in that good as it has proved to be in the results, presuppose all these ideas that are listed here. But of course, this is my personal point of view based on the history of research and studies that I have done. So the first point that I think why open dialogue is very helpful is that humans in their crisis are met in the subjective stream of life, so that all the people are met in the stream of life without categorizing, without in a way stopping the stream of life, that we really want to see everything in an ongoing process. And we also, as the one who want to help each other, are a part of that ongoing stream of life. Second point in my mind is that this is one way to working, including families, but it's no longer a family therapy in the way that we used to think family therapy in the beginning, in which we thought that family forms a system, and the mental health problems, or what we may call symptoms, have some kind of function of that symptoms. Or we neither think that families are a kind of a collection of persons that produce narratives, but we think that dialogue itself is the action and not a tool to it, which is actually a very profound idea on the how to have a grasp of this idea. Then the third point is that in the open dialogue practice, we all the time think about the multiplicity of the synchronization to each other, how the participants, and now I mean the family members, synchronizing to each other, team members synchronizing to each other, and now, of course, the family members and the team members synchronizing to each other and forming something that you may call a relational mind, human mind that is living in the relation. That includes the spoken dialogue, it includes the body gestures, body movements, it includes the function of autonomic nervous systems, and it includes the experiences that we have about the situation. The fourth point in my mind is that, that in open dialogue practice, we dissolve the idea of thinking psychotic behavior as a psychopathology or an illness, but instead it is one way of acting in extreme stress. And in relation to this, the fifth question is about that in one part is, of course, how do we understand psychosis, but how do we understand human life on the whole? We think that the reality is contextual, but it's not only a social construction, but everything sense, all sense in life is making in the way that we participate in the conversation, in the communications. And by doing this, there is a possibility to this dualistic view of humans. And for the first time to think of humans as full embodied human beings. And the next point is that that is very important, that all the ideas of open dialogues are based on all the time ongoing scientific research in the real world context. Making research and science has been intertwined in the development in open dialogue. The clinical practice and research are intertwined and all the time need each other. And this really has been going more than almost 35 years now. And I don't know any other practice, if we think of practice within psychiatry, that could have done that in a very systematic way. And the next point is that in these dialogical sessions, we increase the reflectivity of all participants in the way that we can start to look at our lives from a different point of view, in which we can see the multiplicity of different factors affecting our lives, and not only being focused of one issue we may call symptom or the problematic situation, and neither looking for one solution, but giving the reflectivity. And the last point is that dialogue is an action which we can also evaluate to make possible to learn it. And we have methods to look at the qualities of dialogue, of making all this going better. So this is my answer to the question about what is open dialogue from a bit different point of view of thinking that there are many elements. And actually, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, but I think that we cannot make any proper outcomes that will stand if we do not take into account all of these elements. And there may be, of course, other elements that you need to include.
Thank you, Jaakko. Very helpful.
I just want to say thank you to Jaakko. Again, my name is Ro, and wow, coming off of the history, I definitely feel so proud and honored to represent what I think is happening now and hopefully in the future, which is just building on the foundation. I'm a peer specialist. I've had lived experience with social network meetings in my own family and social network. So I really value so deeply, Jaakko, what you just shared. It does create an avenue for new conversations and new perspectives. And that's exactly what I experienced as a part of my own social network meetings. When I think about the question, what is open dialogue today? I think it's definitely giving respect and concentration to the history, and then also bringing it forward in new ways. And I think a part of that has also been bringing in the lived experience perspective and having that as equal value in the facilitation of social network meetings. And I know that that has been happening at least in Westchester and in the United States and also in the UK in various ways. I've been working with Cindy Peterson-Dana, who's been a trainer, been trained in open dialogue training. So we're really trying to develop a partnership to bring in the lived experience perspective to build on this amazing foundation and add an extra element of dialogue into the conversation. So I think that's what brings me into this dialogic space and the history of why I'm here. One, because I lived through the social network meetings and the dialogic practice that occurred. And now also being in a position, hopefully, to introduce new ideas, to encourage more dialogue with a lived experience and peer perspective. I think that that's invaluable. And it's amazing when you see in meetings what happens when there's someone that can say, hey, you know what? That sounds familiar. So I just think that that's something that I always reflect on as being powerful as we move towards the future and the present and the past.
I'll join in. Thanks, Jaco and Ro. There's so much in that slide to think about. And I mean, one of the things that I've thought about is a more kind of, it feels more like practical, pragmatic, but it has to do with how this work has had an impact on me as a psychiatrist. And I came to it at a time of questioning so much of the foundational principles of the profession. And what I love about this way of working is a place to give up power and to sort of dismantle hierarchy. And I think that resonates in your slides. I mean, I would like to see that and ponder that and take that in a lot more. But I've been thinking a lot, even today and over the past few months, about privilege, and psychiatry has a tendency, well, one of your slides had to talk about stepping back from symptoms and illness talk. And that is not a simple thing to do. Like, that's such a big conversation. And so I love this way of, you know, as Ro talks about, giving voice to the person at the center of concern, giving voice to other people, and then giving back, like giving back the authority that gets put on psychiatrists. And I think that's been really valuable and important. I'll stop there, but thank
you. Thanks, Jaco, for very inspiring contents of your slide. And I don't know what open dialogue is yet, but I would like to talk about dialogical practice in Japan. And I have been practicing open dialogue in Japan with my colleague Yuichi for 5 years now. In practicing it in Japan, we have had to overcome resistance from traditional culture and methods. By thinking about this resistance, I believe we can understand the essential part of open dialogue. There are two keywords, polyphony and trance of uncertainty. Of course, polyphony is an important keyword in open dialogue. Polyphony means coexistence of different voices. That is, there is no dominant voice or no final answer for the problem. patients recover their initiative in the space between polyphony. But polyphony is very difficult word for us Japanese, because we always think that harmony is most important word in our daily activity, of course, in the treatment practice. Many Japanese believe that spirit of cooperation is more important than individualism. But as you know, harmony is antonym of polyphony, and harmony sometimes suppress patient's voice. So we must resist the temptation of harmony and togetherness in Japanese context, but it's not easy for us. And as you know, tolerance of uncertainty is one of 7 principles of open dialogue. I think this is very respectful attitude for otherness. Because of this principle, we don't make treatment plan in advance. Diagnosis and assessment are done as little as possible. We always try to focus on the process of ongoing dialogue. Many Japanese clinicians are so familiar with the PDCA plan, do, check, action cycle that they don't want to abandon their diagnosis system like DSM. But we realized that the course of treatment never follow the plan. We think good outcome always come from unexpected change or developments of network. Many Japanese clinicians tend to become more pessimistic the more experience they have. But we are becoming more optimistic the more tolerance of uncertainty we have. Thank you.
I think I'm the last one. Yes, I'm from Denmark. I think I forgot to say that. I was really pondering this question: what is open dialogue today? So, I was also wondering what angle or which. I mean, we have such a big question and so tiny little time. So it's just an ongoing conversation. But I kind of ended up trying to think, well, okay, I have also been in the system. I'm a part of the Hearing Voices movement. And we can say much of psychiatry, and also open dialogue has been very much occupied by those of us who become what we call psychotic and mad and what have we. So I was kind of looking at how is it? And I thought I'd just draw a little sketch of how I see it right now. And of course, this is stationary, but or not stationary, it's moving all the time. But I was trying to describe it, and I just drew it. So I don't know if it's possible to see. Whoa, here, whoop. And the idea, the thinking actually is we have open dialogue over here, the Lapland version, and at least in my country, I mean, there's been a huge interest in this. And then we have traditional psychiatry here. And this interest is we decide to bring it over, we want to adapt it. So we bring it. However, unfortunately it's really difficult with this camera thing, it becomes an add-on to traditional psychiatry, along with lots of add-ons. And it's allowed to exist as long as it doesn't, upset the balance or the actual, I'd say drug-based paradigm, the psychiatric paradigm of psychiatry. Now, and that's rather sad right now, I would say. However, we're not going to be too pessimistic, because as you can see, I did draw roots. I mean, open dialogue does put roots down into the psychiatric system. I'd also say it has probably more roots out of the system, just along with the other thing. I mean, we have many, illness management, recovery courses, and goodness knows what we all have on top of psychiatry. So this is kind of where I'm actually viewing open dialogue a little bit traditionally. I'd like to see it changing, and I'm hoping that the ongoing conversation is going. And I have this idea for a little bit, because I have, the Hearing Voices Network. We actually have a huge number of similarities. The mutual collaboration, because this is, again, I was thinking of you, Ro, as well, with the peer support and the people who've been in the system. We have a lot we can bring in, including, just now that I'm representing the Hearing Voices. One of the things that made me think of it, just sort of very briefly, is the, for example, tolerance of uncertainty. That's something we're actually extremely, if I may say so, on the Hearing Voices Network, really very good at, simply because in our groups and things, we have actually no choice. We do not have a system that backs us up. So if somebody talks about suicide or talks about all kinds of things, we just have to tolerate it in our groups. And this has given us an extraordinary resilience, I would say, and an ability, and this is something I think we can, for example, share. And the final one I want, which again, human rights, we cannot avoid them. We need to have human rights. It's been very difficult for us to get an ear into psychiatry, but I do actually view, in terms of where we are now, if you like, and I'm hoping that the conversation moving on human rights is that open dialogue could actually perhaps be a part of this. And again, the User Survivor Movement Hearing Voices has a lot of information, a lot of knowledge on human rights, has a lot of also politics, because if this is not taken care of, there is a real risk for open dialogue to be assimilated into traditional psychiatry. So these were some of my sort of thoughts, actually, of where we are right now in this. So thank you. That's just some of my thoughts here. Wait a minute, now I need to find.
So we're going to now invite the reflecting team to reflect on what's been said, and that will take a couple of moments, but feel free to, of course, check on the chat, those that are in the panel, if you feel to. But so the panel will be stepping back and the reflecting team stepping forward.
Okay.
Mia Kurti.
Yeah.
All right, they're not enough. There she is.
This is hard.
Did you get her
No,
allowed to talk?
Yeah, please.
Oops.
That's a very strange experience, being magicked back again. I just wondered what was going through your minds as you were listening to the panel.
Listening to the panel, I got puzzled, really. I got puzzled, and there were some thoughts churning in my head, and I became so curious about certain things I've had. I had traditionally lived experience, peer perspective, and the voice of the person at the center of concern. And this puzzle in my head started with a question: without lived experience and the person at the center of concern, will there be open dialogue? That's my first question. But in my own experience and from where I come and from my own tradition, now bringing that word traditionally again, we dialogue on virtually everything. From being born, growing up, attaining development, and dying. We dialogue about across the board about everything. But now, coming into this particular culture, I can see the division between being human and being a learned expert that has the power and authority to have a voice.
Yes, thank you, Paul. There's many things, what Olga just said, that how many things there are and so little time. But I was also thinking that how much I appreciate the question that came from Louisa and Kermit, that what is open dialogue for us in our own experiences and contexts. And I'm thinking about this about 20 years, the time that I have been spending in this system of mental health, the psychiatry, the system of psychiatry in Finland. And I'm thinking about what Ro was talking about, and Tamaki as well, the polyphony and giving the voice and having the voice of peers. And then I'm thinking about myself as a nurse, that at least in Finland, the system in healthcare is rather traditional in a way that the doctors are giving orders of treatment and nurses are acting out the orders, and they are giving orders to the patients. And as I learned 20 years ago, which I didn't know because I haven't been working in any other systems, that the dialogical elements and the dialogical practice has been dismantling this structure of power in our system. And in my case, it has been giving the voice to the nurses in the system as well. So that was something that was really resonating in me also, and speaks from my history of being part of the dialogical practices at the moment. Maybe something else as well later.
As Mia said just right now, I'm also looking back on my own history about open dialogue. In Japan, it is just 6 or 7 years ago that the idea of open dialogue came into our country. So I feel like I was just first grade of elementary school. So I'm just like a 6 years old boy as a open dialogue student. As Tamaki said, it is not easy to bring the idea or philosophy of dialogical dialogical culture into the traditional medical system in Japan. So it is not easy to have enough time or enough space to have enough good dialogue. But we tried and studied to make even slight change in the process. In Japan, actually, lots of people are getting interested in this open dialogue way. So I find that it is a hope. It is a bright hope in Japan. So when we are keeping to have dialogue ongoing, I guess we can go forward with small steps. So this is a very empowering experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you. When you spoke about elementary school, I actually felt that I had tears in my eyes, because I suppose what came to my mind was humility. And I'm noticing in my body, I'm feeling fear. And maybe it's because I'm on this town hall today, but I think I have a lot of worry about how, listening to the panelists and to what we're saying about how, and yet being dialogical is more being than doing. And so I'm just noticing that, really. And I'm really grateful to what I've heard, but and also, Paul, you're bringing your history with you, and not letting us forget that sometimes, white people kind of take something on that, as you say, has been part of people's culture for centuries, and what we can still be learning, really. So thank you, Mia. Really, really pleased to be here. But I think we're being requested to come back again.
Is there more you wanted to say, Kathy? No, okay. So now we're going to take a moment to have the reflecting team step back and the panelists step forward. This is one of the ways that open dialogue networks work, is that a reflecting team will come and be with the family and the family's network and witness what's happening and then bring their reflection. So we're demonstrating this aspect of the way open dialogue is done in Finland and in other parts of the world.
Don't do that. Don't stop. I wonder if we all might have something to say about what we know about things that are happening in the world today that are fulfilling the inspiration of open dialogue.
Yeah, and also your responses to the reflecting team and each other.
I have so much to say. I was really moved by the reflecting team, listening to what was said. I really resonated with power and privilege. Having been through the system in the United States, I think people get stripped of their humanity a lot of times. And they don't have power and they don't have privilege. And that goes across race, gender. So I often think about that when I'm, put in a position to be a peer and to bring this forward in a way, in partnership with a clinician or whoever else I'm doing facilitation with. Power and privilege is always on my mind. And I think one of the beautiful things is that it is an opportunity, especially bringing in the peer perspective as well as the clinical perspective, to represent and symbolize a different way of relating that hopefully is less of a power differential. So that really stood out to me, reflections on this privilege and power that is very evident, I think, in our systems. And then personally, I also felt kind of like a memory of going through the process and how new and different it was to have a social network and to have a family member and myself in the room together talking about new things that we never shared in the same room because it was never really safe enough. There was a lot of anger and rage, unfortunately, within my social network. So I remember that, oh my goodness, what is this going to be like to share something that I've never shared and hear things that I've never heard. But it turned out that it wasn't dangerous. It actually was a moment of revelation for me personally, to have a different type of space that felt safer than other spaces that I had traditionally been in. So I also felt that memory rising in me when I was hearing the reflecting team as well. And it also just overall thinking culturally, how does this translate and give respect and mindfulness and belong in various cultures and systems?
Actually, a scale, it's huge that we are moving here. Thinking about the comment that Mark and Sandy both made about and you see perhaps also about the idea how difficult it is to be in a conflict within psychiatry, within psychiatric system all the time with a huge resistance, and at the same time we are sharing very sensitive issues like Kathy told about when how she became moved while listening the other one speaking there. And it's so different compared that you give a name, you are feeling this and that, and now Kathy spoke about her feeling what kind of feelings he had in her body. And I felt immediately myself the same kind of feeling. And all this is a very different idea. And now, Ro, when you told about your experience, about how much you were afraid of meeting with your family, and then it appeared that you can do it. You can be in even if I don't, of course I do not know anything about about how is life in your family and what are the things that made you be afraid, but in looking things in relation, it's a magical issue if we manage to do it in a right way. So all of those kind of issues are in my mind. Having lately quite exceptional experiences of being in the meetings in which one person who had a very psychotic, very extreme observation about what is happening around him, that I could know that he had really psychotic experiences. And we met in internet online, and we had 2 meetings within 2 days, and it was amazing. And I always, after 35 years, have this kind of surprises, and it's totally different way of understanding the practice that we are used to understanding, the way that Tamaki said that when you are in a mainstream, you become all the time more and more pessimistic. But when you are in an open dialogue, you become more and more optimistic. And it's so only to say that there are huge issues involved in all this. And as I said in my opening, so that what I'm puzzled at the moment is exactly this point, that that it has to be that our understanding of human life is so different compared to the mainstream psychiatry, and this is the reason of the resistance, that it's so difficult to see the things happening in the way that we see things happening in the dialogical meetings.
Thank you, Jaakko, and thank you for very impressive reflecting. And I'm thinking about the power of team culture. Treatment team is very important element of open dialogue. And all Japanese clinicians are so familiar with the individual therapy setting that they are reluctant to participate treatment team. In Japan, people believe that important or serious conversation should be done in one-on-one setting. So many patients don't like to sit with their families, and neither do their families. But as Jaakko wrote in his book, one-on-one setting is artificial and unnatural setting. I think so. In individual sex therapy, and dialogue tends to be closed and hierarchical. This type of relationships can easily result in codependency or malignant transference, I think. After experiencing dialogical practice by treatment team, we are surprised that team-to-team relationship is very open and non-hierarchical. We can talk more openly and empathetically because there's no concerns about codependence or transference. The treatment team's experience has freed our practice from the curse of neutrality. Thank you.
I want to say also thank you to the reflecting team, and I was thinking of both what you were saying, Jaakko and Tamaki, referring to the sort of well, you didn't use those exact words, but the ones that came to mind, because it felt in my body, a great sadness when I think of more the system. And then when I think about when I'm working with families in a dialogical manner and in these kind of gatherings, how the opposite happens. And it made me start to think about the sort of the more personal, because I have found this whole education, and I was very lucky to be part of the first 3-year education in London, where we were quite a few, well, we were 5 survivors from use and survivors of psychiatry on the education, and this was the first time that I believe this was done within certainly the Finnish, perhaps the Finnish context. But one of the things that has really struck me from there, and that I take with me, is the source of healing in the workplace for me, and how the open dialogue has actually really been able to, on a personal level, help me and allowing me to reach out to those people who actually have the power or had the power, and engage in dialogue. And I think it's definitely from the time when those 3 years when we got to know each other so well, and the healing that occurred between, if you like to say, a psychiatrist contra people who've been in psychiatry, or workers, all the different combinations. For me, that's something that is absolutely ongoing, and is a great source of inspiration, and actually inspires me to carry on, despite my sadness and ultimately pessimism with the actual system. But I do think other things are on the way. The conversation is ongoing. Change is happening. So these were just some of the thoughts that came to mind.
Once again, there's so much in there, and then, this is what happens in meetings, and taking in and thinking about what to respond to. One thing, because you were asking about how this relates to what's going on now, and I was thinking that Zoom helps me, because people who've worked with me would say I needed a mute button, and I know that brings up bad analogies to people a person I wouldn't want to be associated with, but this whole experience reminds me again how how much is going on in a space, and that slowing down and giving everybody opportunity to talk is such a rich experience. But one of the questions I had, it was very interesting to hear Tamaki about the challenges of adapting this to Japan. And then Paul was talking earlier about this being familiar. And I remember the very first time I went to Tornio and I heard this, something about the Finns being quiet people, that they're quiet in multiple languages. This was sort of a joke. And I remember putting on Facebook that open dialogue would never have been invented in my family, where we never have one person at a time talking, and we always overtalk. And so I'm very curious about, it's a question, a curiosity for you, Jaakko. How do you apply science to something that it seems inevitable is going to be adapted in somewhat different ways in different cultures? And I'm really curious to see how that folds out, but it seems like, to me, it feels a little bit like a conundrum. And the other thing I wanted to say about what you just said, Olga, is that for me, there's been a lot of this has been quite poignant and moving, but also painful, because I've had to confront how much I used a kind of othering as a way to get through my life. I think I always cared for my patients, and I was deeply curious. But boy, the pain of it, it was hard. And I I think it contributed in a lot of ways to me. I mean, I've retired, and although I loved it, it felt heavier. I don't even have words for it. So that's maybe that's just a reflection of my own limitations as a person, but.
I feel like sort of jumping in because I was actually just thinking of the last time we could meet, when we could meet in Tornio. And there are two things that stuck out very much for me. And one of them was actually you, Sandy, that you actually apologized, if you not you know, for this, for psychiatry, for the you know, well, you can't apologize for all the abuses and things like that, but it meant a lot to me when you just sort of did a sort of, I don't know, general apology on behalf of your profession. And the other one that also struck me was when I was speaking to some people who who living there, who's used the system of open dialogue in Tornio, and I asked them, "Hey, so do you have a survivor mover, anti-psychiatry, blah 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 thing there?" And I remember them. They looked at me and said, "What's that?" It was completely just not relevant there. And I remember one woman saying to me, "No, why should we? The psychiatrist is our friend. He comes home to dinner." And it just struck me how different. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for inspiring me there.
Olga, you really said a lot that resonated with me. You know, I mean, in the United States, there's such a robust peer movement. It's definitely gotten very far. It has a very, very far and long way to go. But I'm grateful from coming from that heritage of the peer movement. It's taught me so much, and it's also been a place of healing. So it's sad to hear that maybe there's some places and spaces where lived experience is still very much in a violence and an assault type of place, and that there's no place or community to kind of rally together and unite from those very, very negative experiences and spaces. So that's what's coming to mind as I'm hearing you speak about the variation in different cultures. It makes me have gratitude that at least in the United States, we're really trying very hard to heal and to move into more positive healing spaces.
I perhaps would like to make a comment about one of the questions that Sandy made about the science in all this. So that in psychiatry, there are some huge mistakes that has happened. One of the huge mistakes is this orientation on symptoms. And the second huge mistake is the idea of a very narrow and thin idea of science and research. And it really has been very harmful. And also what has happened in psychiatry is that the mainstream psychiatry is based on a very thin and very poor science. And that's I'm very sad to say it, but the more I know it, the more I realize that it's totally wrong. And the science that actually has been in a way developed for me in this practice of developing open dialogue is a very different kind of, because it all the time happens where the life is as a base of the practice. And in science, we really have a lot of a variety of different methods, point of views. And so for me, the science having the possibility to take a step and look at our practice, to take a step away and look at our practice in all the methods that we have, in statistics, in interviews, in making an analysis of the sessions and making writings, whatever we have, and all the time in connection to the practice, and that way to be open to have a feedback to develop the practice, but also to develop, of course, the scientific point of view. And in that way, for me, this science becomes a kind of essential and rich part of developing the practice, and in which they could be intertwined and feeding each other all the time. Whereas in the mainstream idea, the science is a very colonialistic position which tries to define all that is possible to be done in the clinical practice, and that's where it goes so wrong.
Thank you all. I think, would this be a good time for us to invite the reflecting team back? Okay, so we're going to have a pause again, attendees, as we're stepping back with the panel and stepping forward with the reflecting. Okay, so first person, Mia, Kathy, do it one by one. There she is. No, that's not her. Next one. Okay, Kathy, toward me. There we are. Richie, is it right at the bottom? I think you missed Kathy.
Takes.
Richi's at the bottom.
Who did it?
Paul. Eric. There he is, at the top. Oops.
Where are your thoughts at the moment?
Just feel really moved by the sharing of personal stories, and a sense of feeling of things kind of going deeper, and feeling that connection. And I can't help but what's still sitting with me is Paul's question, your question about, can we have open dialogue without a person at the center? And I just think about how polarized things are in society at the moment, and we so need vulnerable spaces to actually connect. Yeah. What about you, Mia? What's going through your mind?
Yes, about what you say, and that is linked to what Jaakko was talking about, and many people have been talking about implementing open dialogue. And as I have understood as well from the stories about the developments from the 80s, that they didn't start to do open dialogue. They started by asking and saying that whatever we are doing at the moment isn't working. So what do we need to do now? So that was the starting point of things starting to change.
And why has that come up for you now? What's?
Well, I'm thinking, I'm sometimes wondering, when we are talking about open dialogue, I sometimes feel that people are trying to follow something. They are trying to do open dialogue. And as you said before, that rather than doing, what if it would be about being? And how for me it is about the dialogue in the center of it. And how do we create the dialogue so that we can create this reality here and now, in this very moment, as we are doing at this very moment with each other. So that's the true essence and the power to me. Of course, there are practical things and the systems and all of that. So I don't want to be naive either, but being with each other by asking that, what I'll be doing here, and staying connected to the conversation and to the dialogue, which can be scary sometimes, at least for me. What about you, Yuji and Paul? Where are your thoughts at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering about how to make or create mutual languages with the people who are not so familiar with open dialogue or dialogical practice. I'm thinking of the traditional psychiatrist in Japan. And the word here said, science is moving my emotion, science. So lots of scientific papers are written in English, and in Japan, for Japanese people, reading the English journals are not so easy. But I find the possibility to have new way to connect with the psychiatrists through the scientific language. So I'm also feeling the burden of responsibility here as a researcher because I'm not so good as a scientist. But I think I have to learn more. That's it. Thank you.
At the moment, I feel very fragile, really fragile. I feel fragile on two fronts. On one front, I feel I am losing myself and where I'm coming from. and looking at it in the context of what is happening around the world at the moment. And what is happening around the world in the moment, in my own perspective, and what I think about it is humanness is being fragmented even more and more, with the result that we don't have that forum where we can be together and be human and have dialogue with one another. But being here in this space now, I feel safe because I can say exactly how I feel. I can talk with fellow human beings who have that feeling of compassion and humanness for one another. But what happens after this space? Where do I go next? It's quite a burden in my heart. And that burden I carry it to work when I'm working in the mental health service. It is quite frightening for me at the moment.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, thank you. It is a frightening time, and it is a comfort to be together in this way. We're going to now pause again and invite the panel back. Thank you all for your reflections. Very healing to hear, to be with you. I feel that we need several more hours, but we don't have them. Many people, some people are having to go back to sleep so they can get up in a few hours to go back to work. I'm very aware of how rich and powerful and healing it is to be in this way. So last thoughts from you, dear panelists.
I'm just so grateful. And I think Paul, speaking to where do you go is what I'm taking with me. And hopefully finding and developing and creating those spaces.
I guess I'm unmuted. I just want to say thank you. It's a real privilege to be with the group and hear people's thoughts. And Jaakko, I'm looking forward to the book. It should be really valuable and important. So thank you all.
Thank you for all joining us. And I recognized subtle and powerful characteristic of open dialogue again. Thank you very much.
And I just want to also say thank you so very much. The reflections were very touching, and Paul, you made me very emotional, as you've often done before. I just want to end where I started. We cannot ignore human rights in psychiatry, and neither can open dialogue if it does not wish to be assimilated. And I saw somebody write just on the corner, don't know who it was, maybe we should be doing open dialogue with psychiatry. I thought that was quite an interesting thought. But yes, inspired again. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, me too. I'm deeply moved of many of the comments that we are, and also being very sensitive to know that our friends from Japan, they are in the very morning time, giving their time to share with us. So I'm very grateful and feel very humble of this fact that you are doing. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you.
Ray and Rafaela, do you have last words that you'd like to share?
Rafaela, do you have anything, or me?
Thank you, everybody. It was a great experience. Thank you for the reflection. Thank you to the panelists and to the people in the chat. Thank you.
Very much the same from me. I think I was more with the dialogue in the chat and the questions, so I'm going to listen back on Mad in America to the recording of this and really absorb what the panel and the reflecting team have said, and just reminding people that that's available as well, because that was a question that came up. Thank you so much.
Bye. All the recording will be available also on the HOPEnDialogue website, so you can find all there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Me too. I feel like there's much, much, much nourishment waiting in the listening again and again. And I'm so grateful that we have this library for everyone to draw from. And thank you, each of you, so very, very much for coming on and for all that you have been through to bring your wisdom and compassion to this moment. Together, Shauna, do you want to say something?
I've just been very moved. I've been so happy to see the way that you were able to take this technology to show how open dialogue can work. It's not exactly the same, but I think it was a very a beautiful way of showing how it can work, and some of the wonderful people who are using this practice and the compassion of it. So I'm very impressed, very grateful. Thank you.
Shada, for those that don't know, is the new executive director of Open Excellence.
Open Excellence is one of the sponsors of this dialogue.
Yeah.
Proud to be a sponsor and very grateful to be here.
Right.
Maybe I wanted to add just a thing that is one of the most important aspects of our community is the way how we host. And thank you, Carmen and Luisa, for the way you are hosting the town hall. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to suggest for an ending, one of the customs, as we understand it, for beginning and ending open dialogue sessions is with a handshake, which we might think of as an embodied experience of connecting with others. So in the absence of handshakes, we'll just bow.
In the Japanese way, Luigi and Tamaki guide us.
Yeah. Thank you. Arigato.
Arigato. Thank you.
Arigato.
Thank you all.
very much.
And yeah, thank you.